Well, do I really have to introduce the man here whom I am mesmerized to have in our studio today?
Thank you,
And
Lucy.
it's an amazing time right now to have you here. Not only just that, a big honor for All India Radio because Mr. Kabir Bedi himself started his career with All India Radio many years back. So I'm sure you must also be feeling nostalgic about being here with us on All India Radio.
Absolutely. You know, it's more than 50 years ago that I started my career out here. And it was my first job, and I was working in All India Radio because I was studying at St. Stephen's College. I got the marks to get in, but my parents were such idealistic people and lived such idealistic lives, fighting for the freedom of the country, worked with Tibetan refugees, philosophers, religious people. They had no money. So I had to work my way through college. And one of the ways I did that was working with All India Radio, and I must thank them for giving me my first job. In fact, my book begins with the interview with the Beatles that I managed to get as a cub reporter of All India Radio. And that was quite an adventure.
I read that and I was like, wow, All India Radio was there right on the very first page of Mr. Kabir Bedi's novel.
Absolutely. It was, I went to I was the biggest Beatles fan in the world. And when I heard that they unexpectedly came into town, I thought, I'm going to get to them. And I went to my bosses in All India Radio and I said, please let me interview the Beatles. I said, how are you going to get through? The whole Delhi press corps wants to get there. They're all surrounding the hotel. How are you going to get? I said, give me the tape recorder, give me the badge. I'll see what I can do. So they gave me the tape recorder and the badge. And being a big Beatles fan, I knew that I had to reach their manager, Brian Epstein. None of the Daily Press knew Brian Epstein. And I waited for him and watched the elevator doors. Everyone was looking for the Beatles. I was looking for the manager. Finally, he came down. I accosted him as he was leaving the hotel. And I said, sir, I want to interview the Beatles. Absolute nonsense. The boys will not do any interviews for anybody. I said, sir, the government of India has asked for an interview and scheduled it for tonight. He said, that's impossible. The boys will not do an interview. I said, sir, I'm a big Beatles fan. I don't want to get them into trouble. And I knew that they had gotten into trouble with the government of the Philippines just before they came here. And I knew the manager wouldn't want another incident with the government. And I was technically correct. I was from All India Radio, which is a government radio station. So I said, sir, it's a government matter. So, I will do the bloody interview. So I was happy enough. When I went up to his room, he really wasn't feeling well. I said, oh, God, I can't do this. I said, sir, it's scheduled for tonight. So he walked me across the length of the floor to the other end where the suite of the Beatles was, knocked on the door and said, boys, give this guy an interview. Do me a favor. And Paul McCartney opened the door and said, yes, absolutely. And I was in with the Beatles. Now, what happened in that room, all that wonderful interview I had, that's in my book. You've got to read the book to know what happened. But what followed from there became a turning point in my life because All India Radio broadcast it. And when I went to get a copy, they couldn't find it. So I was furious. It's my interview with the Beatles. I've got to have a copy. Investigation was launched. Turned out that they had erased the interview because those days all recordings were on tape and tapes had to be imported and were very expensive. And All India Radio didn't have the money, so they would tape over older programs. And the boys in the back room had no idea what I'd given them. It was broadcasting gold. They could have broadcast it forever. But they erased it. And this really depressed me so much, it made me think that I don't want to work in All India Radio anymore. I was so upset. And with 700 rupees in my pocket, I set off for Bombay to find my fortune. So, in retrospect, looking back on it now, I have to thank those people for erasing those tapes, because it gave my life a whole new direction that led me to Bollywood, Europe, Hollywood, and a career across 3 continents. I'd really like to take a moment to bow my head in homage to this great lady called Pramila Premchand, who ran a program called Date With You in my earliest days, but was a very important woman in the English language programming
Yes,
of All India Radio.
Yes.
And I adored her, and she passed away this year. And I just wanted to salute her memory as well.
Regarding your book, what was your inspiration behind writing this?
You know, Lucy, I'd been wanting to write my life story for a long time. 10 years I was actively thinking about how to write it. I've led a very unusual and interesting life, full of all kinds of triumphs and tragedies and great loves and great losses and huge setbacks and milestones and mistakes. And I just knew I had a wonderful story to tell. But I didn't know how to tell it. Finally, when the pandemic began, I had a epiphany, I had a brilliant kind of insight into how I could tell these stories. And I set out to write it. And I wrote like a madman for 1 year, and I finally put it down. I thought, wow, I've put down my life story. And it was a moment of great and deep satisfaction for me. And I must say, for all the suffering the pandemic has caused, and I feel for all the people that have lost loved ones and jobs and everything, for me the pandemic was a godsend. It gave me the time to think about my book, to write my book. This book was born at the start of the pandemic, released at the height of the second wave of the pandemic, and it still became a bestseller. So I have much to be grateful for.
That's wonderful. I think this is going to be a great motivation for anybody and who's listening to you at the moment, because making the most of situations like this, I think, is a very, very positive.
That's a very important point you've hit, Lucy, because all my life, every time I faced a major reverse or a major situation which seemed like end of the world to me, I've reminded myself that crises are moments of opportunity. It doesn't feel like that at the time. You say you've lost a job, you feel, my God, it's the end of the world, how am I going to live, how am I going to pay my bills? But if you really get over the sorrow of that moment and think of what other doors this could be opening for you, it could be a moment of great power. That's why I call crises your points of power. They give you, and this has happened repeatedly in my life, whether it was, my tape being taped over at All India Radio, whether it was my entering Bollywood, whether it was a time when even after my immense success in Europe, I actually faced great financial problems because of bad investments I made, and I faced bankruptcy. So, it's anyone going bankrupt is hard enough. But when a celebrity goes bankrupt and there's lifestyle expectations and children to put through schools and divorce and alimony payments to make and obligations to fulfill, the pressure becomes immense and you can really sink into a very dark place. How you rise from that, again, is by saying, no, I must see what I can turn the situation into. Remember the boy that left Delhi with 700 rupees in his pocket. That's the spirit. And that's what made me rebuild my life, film by film, and to the point where I was eventually honored with the highest honor that the Italian Republic can give anybody. They made me a Cavaliere. So there's always a silver lining to every cloud, and hopefully a rainbow to every shower.
Absolutely right. What has been your that push, that strength within you? What has really got you crossing all these boundaries?
Many things. One is One was, I never had a lot of things materially in my child because of my parents and their lives. So I wanted to have a home and to do things, but above all, but through the exam, I wanted to do something that touched people's lives. And I set out with that motivation. I must touch people's lives in some way. But the strength that I got to overcome adversity was when I looked at my parents. I mean, here was a couple that gave up everything for the independence of the country. My mother was one of Gandhi's hand-picked satyagrahis. My father was a communist revolutionary. As I said, very little money, printing pamphlets on hand presses and speaking to people, rabble-rousing, etc. But after independence, they didn't even seek the rewards of independence. They turned to religion. My mother went on to become the highest-ranked Buddhist nun in the world. My father, a leading philosopher. But seeing the strength and equanimity and peace with which they faced their greatest economic problems, not having money to educate their children, they did sacrifice a lot to educate us well, but not having money for anything else, all that gave me great strength. I also spent 3 months of my life, which I've written about in my book, ordained as a Buddhist monk. And the techniques of meditation I learnt there, Vipassana meditation from Mahasi Sayadaw in Burma, also gave me a lifelong way of centering myself and gave me a lot of peace and strength. So those are things that gave me the strength to overcome, even in darkest moments.
Which was that little one moment in your life which made you switch over, I would say, from an actor to an author?
I've always had the desire to be an author. I've even had the ability to be an author. But having the ability to write doesn't make you a writer. Writers write regularly, and I didn't. I did the odd piece, etc. My mother was a great writer. I learned a lot from her. I spent 5 years of my life in advertising, which most people don't know. And I was trained as a copywriter and filmmaker. So I learned a lot of things on writing there. But the last 10 years, I just felt this burning need to tell my story. Because, when you're a famous person, a lot of things are written about you, an image is created about you. And some of it wasn't favorable. Some said he's a playboy, some said he's this, that, and the other. I thought, doesn't matter. In the end, truth will out. What I discovered is sometimes truth doesn't always come out. Sometimes you have to tell your story. Let people know what really happened. So to make that happen, I decided that at this point in my life, I must really tell my story. Because those that really care about me really know the truth. Many have just got this impressions they picked up from the media of what my life is. And if you've had 4 marriages and 3 divorces, it seems like a pretty colorful life, which it is, but not in the sense that they think. My story is not what people imagine it is. That's what they discover in my book. So I needed to put that down, and the spark came at the beginning of the pandemic when I said, it's now or never. I've got to put it down because I have much to talk about.
Yes, in your book, when I was just going through your book, I saw that you have really poured your heart and soul into it. There might have been certain moments in your life while you were penning them down, where tears might have flowed out down from your eyes, or maybe there was a moment where you were very, very happily penning it down. So can you share those little moments of yours?
Lucy, it's easy to write about the wonderful parts of one's life.
Right.
That, how I got into Bollywood, how my first few films were big hits, how I became an all-India name early in my career. Those are wonderful, pleasant things. How I won the audition to do the Sandokan series in Italy, which made me a huge star in Italy. What was the consequences of that wonderful explosion of Beatlemania around me in terms of the types of crowds that gathered and success I had? Those are the easy parts to remember. The hard part is when I talked about the depths and the intimacies of my emotional relationships, because they were very painful moments. There were very beautiful moments also, joyous moments too, but also very troubling moments. And writing about that wasn't easy because Parveen Babi was a very intelligent, extremely sensitive, well-spoken, aware person. But she did have certain problems. And I had to deal with them. I was the caregiver. The impression created that Parveen Babi had problems after she broke up with Kabir Bedi is simply not true. We broke up because I wanted to solve the problems that she faced, and she refused to face them. And that was the root. So I did the best I could within that situation. And I wrote about it.
I would like to know from you is while dealing with the name, fame, like all of us remember the Sandokan era of yours, even the Octopussy and the Bold and the Beautiful. We've gone through it. We've grown up watching you do that. Yes, you had a lot of name, fame, status, and there was a huge crown there, and of course, like women were drooling over you, men were envying you. So this is what was the scene during your era time. So how did you deal with this kind of stardom? Did it affect your ego? Did it affect your mind? Did it at any point affect you?
Of course it affects you. Of course it affects you profoundly. But let me just complete what I was saying in the last question. The most difficult chapter for me to write was a chapter on my son, who was suffering from schizophrenia. And there's a whole chapter on how I tried to prevent him committing suicide because of the despair he felt from his condition. That brought a lot of tears back to my eyes and brings a lot of tears to the eyes of those that read this chapter, because it's really the heartfelt story of a father trying to save his son. I'll leave people to read that. But coming back to your larger question of how success affects you, there's no question that the success of Sandokan changed my life completely. Because suddenly, from being an aspiring actor in Bollywood, you become a superstar in Europe. And the kind of success that actors dream of but very rarely achieve. And so dealing with that was again a huge challenge, because people think dealing with difficulties and problems and setbacks is a challenge. Believe me, the challenge of dealing with the problems of fame is no less, because suddenly there's enormous demands on your time. What you do or say affects a lot of people. You can greenlight projects, you can kill projects. There's a lot that rides on the decisions that you have to make, the difficult decisions of success. And, being also the first Indian actor to be cast in a James Bond film, again gave me a huge worldwide audience. And there's, demands from fans everywhere wanting your picture, inviting you here, inviting you there. And then The Bold and Beautiful is again a worldwide series, the second most popular television series in the world. 1 billion people watch it. And I was on there for almost a year. And suddenly, these people have their conventions, they have their fan bases, they have their events they call you to. There's hundreds of thousands of people that want your autographs and photographs. It creates a lot of pressure on your time. And then how you deal with that pressure and how you allocate that time is also a huge problem, because if you give in to everything that's asked of you, you won't have time to do anything else. If you sign every photograph that's asked of you, you won't have any money left. There's just a lot of decisions that you have to take, value decisions. So of course I'd sign autograph photographs, but I'd sign them with those that took trouble to write a proper letter to me. Not saying, please send me an autograph photograph. This is my address. I can't do that. There's too many people. But, fame is something every actor seeks. A lot of people want fame, but actors certainly need it because that's their bread and butter. And fame has its own problems, because you lose a certain amount of privacy. And there's a constant conflict between the desire of an actor to keep his life private and the desire of people to know everything about that actor. There's no rights here. They're competing desires. And you have to balance out how much you can share of your life and how much people are entitled to know of your life and how much you're entitled to keep to yourself. That's an ongoing shifting boundary, and you have to decide as things happen.
Were you able to say everything that you wanted to in your book?
I wanted to say, let me say, what I wanted to do with my book was to tell the story of my life. So that's what I stuck to. If I started saying everything I wanted to say, you would have a 1,000-page book. And I didn't have the luxury of a 1,000-page book. I wanted no more than a 300-page book with a generous font size so people can read it easily, and with photographs so people can see many moments of my life. So I stuck to the stories that are the most evocative parts of my life, the most transformative moments, the most deeply felt relationships, the most heady successes, the most heart-wrenching setbacks. All that is what I focused on. What I think about the rest of the world, what I think about society, all that maybe come in another book, but I couldn't put it all together in one. But I have got a chapter in this book on what I believe and the evolution of my beliefs, and what I believe today. So to know, because all religions give us wonderful human values to live by. The founders of all religions are truly great people. All religions give us a sense of community, a sense of belonging. But philosophically, they're saying very different things. Some religions say there's destiny. Some say there's free will. Some say there's one life. Others say there's many lives. Some say there's heaven and hell. Others say there's karma. What's the truth of our existence? This is a question that has been with me all my life. And I've searched through it by reading, meditating, talking to gurus, trying to figure what resonates for me. I'm not saying that I have the universal answer. I'm saying what resonates for me as a sensitive, caring, thinking human being with an open mind. Which of these beliefs resonate for me? And my conclusions are in my book. Because, just to give you an example, I do believe in free will. I don't believe in destiny. I do believe that rebirth happens. I'm not sure it happens for all, but I'm fully convinced that the phenomenon of rebirth exists, as has been seen in many cases documented around the world, not the least the story of how they found the Dalai Lama. And can you believe any society will take, after the death of its leader, will go to the son of a peasant on the outskirts of the kingdom, pick up a 3-year-old boy and say, you are our political and spiritual leader. Not only is the strength of their belief in their finding reincarnates, but also that he turns out to be such a remarkable human being. So, these are proofs of rebirth that I have encountered. And as I said, there's many other aspects that I've explored. My conclusions are in my book. Read it, you'll find out what I've discovered.
Yes, that is going to be extremely...
Stories I must tell.
Yes, stories I must tell. Yes, there must have been a moment in your life where you had to really cope up with your success. What was that one little moment which brought about the change and that success dawned upon you, especially after you left All India Radio?
I've had fame in various forms throughout my life, either at the local level, national level, international level. In Bombay, I first became famous when I did a play by Girish Karnad called Tughlaq, where I played the title role. Then Bollywood made me famous in India with Kache Dhage and Nagin and films that I did in my early years. Then Sandokan made me famous, across Europe. And then the Bond film and Bold and Beautiful made me famous around the world. But the moment that there were two moments that happened that really brought home the fact to me that I'd arrived in a certain kind of way. When Parveen and I arrived in Rome at the time of Sandokan's release, and she came with me at the time, that's a very interesting chapter. And I was coming down the steps of the plane to the tarmac, and I saw this bank of photographers with flashlights blazing. And I didn't believe they were for me. I looked over my shoulder to see who was the celebrity behind me they were photographing. And Parveen gave me a jab in the ribs and said, "They're for you, smile." And suddenly I was smiling like a newly crowned Roman emperor. The other time was when, towards the end of our first visit to Rome, Parveen and I were staying at the Excelsior Hotel on Via Veneto in Rome. And we looked out of the window of our suite across the street. There was this newsstand that sold newspapers and magazines. And I looked at it with Parveen by my side. Every single magazine had pictures of me and Parveen, or my character Sandokan, on the cover. And it was a moment saying, wow, an Indian actor in Italy, in a foreign country, being on the cover of every magazine, being on every television show, every radio show, that was a heady moment.
That was a real heady adrenaline rush moment.
Yeah.
The real wow moment of yours.
It really was. It was exhilarating and strangely humbling in a way. I don't know why I felt... I hate to use the word humbled because the word should be proud. But at that time I really felt, not humbled, but an immense sense of gratitude. That's what came. Humble is the wrong word. People should never say, "I'm so humbled by this honor." They should be proud of honors. But I felt this great sense of gratitude that I had achieved more than what I dreamt of even achieving.
What is it surprises you about people, and are there any surprises that you're holding back?
You know, there's an English saying, "There's nought as queer as folk," which means there's nothing as strange as people. People are very strange in the sense that there's so many dimensions to every human being. And it's always surprising to discover things about people. But what affected me the most was when I found that there were people that I really loved and looked up to, who were people who I couldn't trust, who let me down in some deep, fundamental ways. That wounded me very deeply. So I always say that give your trust with great care, because when you trust somebody, you make yourself vulnerable to being hurt by them. So give your trust with great care, whether it is in a relationship of emotion, or a financial relationship, or a professional relationship. Give trust with care. Let people earn your trust. Your trust is a very precious thing. If it lasts, it's gold, but it also can be a very perishable commodity.
I understand that. Yes. As a role model, what are you trying to give to the humankind through your book?
Well, it's nice that you call me a role model, and I would like to be a role model, but my life is, as my book shows, is not one of perfection. My book is full of my strengths, but also my weaknesses, my great milestones, but also my mistakes. So what I'm trying to say through my book is, learn from my mistakes. Learn from my mistakes. Don't make the kind of things that cost me a lot of time, effort, money, and at times love. Learn from my mistakes. Learn about the decisions, the dilemmas, the dramas that you face, both with success and with failure. Learn from that. But above all, we are all human beings. We are all on our own journeys. And there is a great beauty and wonder to being a human being. It's one of the most precious gifts in the universe to have life and to be a human being, a thinking, sensitive, caring human being. And let us never forget the miracle of that, or underestimate that, or drown it in daily, day-to-day worries. All those things come and go. But let's never lose sight of the miracle of our existence. Life is a miracle. You couldn't ask for more.
Absolutely right. That's wonderful. But one other thing I'd like to know from you is, as you grew up, there might have been some little desires you had inside, and you wanted to fulfill those desires. So, what was the most important one, and have you achieved or have you fulfilled that desire?
In some senses, yes. In some senses, no. Every child has a great desire to impress their parents, to make their parents proud. And that was a big desire I had, because I really idolized my parents. They were such extraordinary human beings. And, my mother's work for the Tibetan refugees was extraordinary. 3 books have been written on her, by BBC journalist Andrew Whitehead, by Vicky Mackenzie, by Naomi Levine. Extraordinary lives. My father wrote books and was a great philosopher. Amazing people. So my desire was to make them proud that I was their son. I was very proud to be their son, but I wanted them to be proud of having me as a son. And I think with the success that I had in Italy, my mother was able to see that before she passed away. So there's a great sense of satisfaction that I was able to make my mother proud before she passed away. And my father was always such a positive influence in my life, and was obviously very proud of what I had achieved, both in Italy and America, which he saw. And that was a great satisfaction to me. And those were one of the things that was in me as a child, which was fulfilled, since you ask.
And one last question about your cooking Italian food.
Italian food. Italian food is absolutely magnificent. On the surface, it looks very simple. You think, what is... They just boil a pasta, add a little tomato, add a little cheese. And it's not that at all. When you travel in Italy, you realize the incredible variety of tastes that they have in their pastas and their antipastas, what they serve before the pastas, in their salads, in their cheeses, in their milk products. Extraordinary. And the beauty is that Italian food is not difficult to cook. As they say, it's easy if you know how. But Italian food is relatively easier than, say, a very complex Indian curry. I mean, you set out to make a really great chicken dish, or say, chicken chettinad, or, a dum pok. Those are complex things to make. Italian foods tend to be far more simple to make, but then the trick is in the mix of ingredients and the balance of ingredients. And what I marvel in Italy is how tastes change every few hundred miles. Italy and India have a lot of similarities. We have this tremendous love of food and variety in our cuisines. We have a language where we use our hands when we speak, both of us. We have a culture that is dependent on or based on religion, Christianity in the case of Italy, and other religions like Hinduism and Islam and Buddhism and Jainism and many other religions in India. But religion is important. Family is very important to Indians and Italians. The mother figure is very important. So many similarities. And so it is with food. Italian food represents to me one of the healthiest cuisines in the world, one of the simplest to make, and with the greatest varieties of taste that you can find.
Superb. So we all must get into the Italian food. Well, stories that I must tell are tumultuous stories set in Hollywood, Bollywood, and Europe. The joys of blazing new trails abroad and the dangers of them. Well, it was indeed a pleasure to have you here with us, and talking to you was even more mesmerizing, and hearing so much from you, I'm sure everyone is going to really benefit from it.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you. Let me just say that, not only did I do the interview with the Beatles while I was here, but I also used to broadcast on the external services. I used to read news at night so that I could study in the day. And it's really a very emotional moment for me to come back to All India Radio, where I began my career, and to be talking about my life 50 years later with you, sitting here. It's like completing a full circle. So it's a very special moment for me to be here with you, and I thank you for it.
So it's indeed an honor, and thank you very much for taking out your precious time for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.